Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Bonnie and I'm the Farmhouse Witch. Today's video is going to be all about the basics of Spellwork. This video is meant to be a sister video to a video that's already up on my channel. I will link it somewhere up here. Long story short, that video talks about fundamental basics in terms of learning, doing your research, critical thinking, staying rooted in reality. I highly encourage you to watch that if you're a beginner. I have some very strong opinions about approaching witchcraft from an academic standpoint. Of course, I'm biased because I was a teacher. I taught middle school and high school English. I also hold a master's degree and a bachelor's degree in English education, so I'm very biased when it comes to approaching learning and the best ways to learn. Aside from that, I've also been a practicing witch for 10 years now, so I do have some pretty firm opinions. That kind of segues into my disclaimer, which is I believe witchcraft should be firmly rooted into reality. Overall, that just helps avoid spiritual psychosis and harmful rhetoric that's present within the craft. Most importantly, spell work is work. It's called work for a reason. You have to do the things to enact change. And it's not just a quick fix. So if you think you're gonna light a candle and lose 100 pounds overnight or become a millionaire overnight, that's just not realistic. Additionally, I'm not gonna be covering grounding or cleansing spiritually because those are two separate videos I plan on making in the future. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the video because I have a feeling it's gonna be very long. I have a lot of things to talk to you guys about. So for our topics, we're talking about magic with a C versus magic with a CK, rules and ethics, types of witches, tools, spellwork basics, when spells go wrong, magic words, music, motions, moon phases, seasons and wheel of the year, elements, days and times, color magic, and spell disposal. Also, I'm not going to be getting into crystals, herbs, deities, or things that would deserve a full video to themselves. And of course, I'm mentioning things in this video that can make your spells more powerful, but I'm not saying that your spells aren't powerful if you don't use these things. This video is just to give you an overall idea, and it's not meant to be a strict rule guide. Now, I understand that that is a lot to jump into, and like I said, this video is probably going to be very long. I'm gonna try to be direct and to the point, which is hard for me because I like to talk. As always, I will put timestamps below so you can jump to whatever part you want to view. But let's start with magic with a C versus magic with a CK. And if you catch me looking down, I've written myself notes so I can help myself stay on track. Magic with a CK is often thought to be an older version or older spelling of the word magic, but it's often accredited to 𝒂𝒊𝒏𝒆𝒔𝒊𝒏𝒆𝒄𝒕. He's the one who really used that spelling a lot and kind of made it famous. It's heavily associated with ritualistic and ceremonial magic such as thelema. There's an author named Thorn Mooney. She's also here on YouTube. She's a fellow witch, and in her book The Witch's Path, she does a really great job of talking about this topic. Essentially what she says though is 𝒂𝒊𝒏𝒆𝒔𝒊𝒏𝒆𝒄𝒕 really wanted to make a distinction between show magic, fake magic, magic tricks, and actual magic. There's also a distinction here with magic with a K and magic with a C in terms of what they're doing. So magic with a CK in the ceremonial space really focuses on the power of the self, your will, destiny, and desire, versus magic with a C refers to usually attracting things, right? Luck, love, prosperity, abundance, mundane things. Thorn Mooney also mentions that it's very common in the ceremonial space for ceremonial practitioners to refer to modern day witchcraft as in folk witchcraft or witchcraft that focuses on material and mundane things as low magic, and witchcraft that's ceremonial that focuses on the will, destiny, power as high magic. Some people in our space use these interchangeably. There is a distinction, which is why I'm bringing that up. Some people have firm opinions on it, like Thorn Mooney. She believes that modern day witches that just do the mundane and don't go over into the ceremonial space should not be using magic with the spelling K at the end. Our next topic is rules and ethics, and there are no rules when it comes to witchcraft, but there are a ton of opinions. You're gonna develop your own guidelines and your own ethical sense of the witchcraft world depending on your path and depending on your tradition, if you have a tradition that you're following. An example of this is Wiccans. Wiccans usually follow the Rede, which is do as you will, harm none. Again, that's just an example. Here is where you take the time to think about what feels right to you and what feels wrong and decide for yourself. My personal gnosis here is that I believe witchcraft is about balance, because to me, witchcraft reflects the natural world. And the natural world is all about balance, right? The circle of life. I don't believe that magic can be truly good or truly bad. You'll hear a lot of people throw around the terms white witchcraft, black witchcraft. You'll see a lot of shaming in the community if you're somebody who does baneful workings, or even I've seen people shame over reversal workings because they're like, technically you're sending something out and you shouldn't be doing that. That's bad. I don't subscribe to that notion, and I don't get offended when people try to shame me because I don't really care. The way I see it is sometimes that scale is unbalanced when somebody messes up your piece, and sometimes I feel like it's my duty to help balance the scales again. So I'm not against baneful workings, long story short. I know that was like a little tangent, but let's get into the next topic. I want to talk to you really quick about power. Where does power come from? A lot of us come into the craft with biases from other traditions or other religions. Everybody has a bias no matter what. I think there's kind of three main groups of thought here. Some people believe that there is a power in the universe. Some people just believe in spiritual power and energy in general. And some people believe in the power of themselves. I believe all three of those things. So I use a mixture of that in my craft. I believe all of those things to be true, but again, you do you. Now we're gonna take a quick second to talk about the types of witches. These are very trendy videos that you see, unfortunately, on YouTube and on TikTok. And it's giving a lot of nothing. So you're just literally putting nouns in front of the word witch, right? Plant witch, kitchen witch, crystal witch. And I think the intention when people are making these videos is they're wanting to talk about the different types of practices and the different pathways that you can take to witchcraft. Folk magic is an example of this because I feel like it's growing in popularity in the witchy space, and folk magic can help you connect with your ancestors, which is why some people seek it out. Personally, I'm a folk practitioner. I have a heavy influence of Appalachian witchcraft and Irish witchcraft. My ancestors that were closest to me, so my grandpa's family specifically, came from Ireland and they settled in the mountains of Appalachia, so I have a lot of influence of that over my path specifically. A lot of witches practice a mixture of things from different paths and different traditions, and they call themselves eclectic witches. That term I feel like is less popular nowadays, but it used to be very popular in the 2010s. Personally, I think it's really hard to find a practitioner that just practices one thing and really fits that description of a plant witch or whatever. I think we all mix things, which is why I'm putting this part in here. Don't feel like you have to fall under a certain category. It's okay to mix and match. I'm a folk witch, but I like to practice kitchen magic and magic within my day-to-day life. Don't get too caught up in the titles because it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you know your path. Now let's get into tools. Now this is a hot button topic. I feel like if you're in a certain tradition, it might require you to possess certain tools, but I'm going to tell you right now, the most important tool that you can have is yourself. Your intention, your will, right? Your power, that's the most important thing. It's really easy in witchcraft to get caught up in consumerism, and I'm looking at my altar right now and all of these lovely things that I've acquired throughout the years. And I remember when I was starting witchcraft and in my parents' house, I didn't have the ability to have a bunch of tools, and it honestly made me feel bad about myself. But I want to tell you right now that you don't need all these fancy tools, okay? You just need yourself. Yes, tools are nice to have, but I have some opinions on tools and what you actually need. For example, I'm a folk practitioner, and a lot of that comes from our ancestors. Sorry, there was a hair in my eye. But a lot of that comes from our ancestors, and when we think of our ancestors' practices, they didn't have all these fancy tools or witchcraft shops near them. They literally had what they had, which sometimes was nothing, right? Pieces of paper, dirt, mud, rocks. And when you think about the history of witchcraft in general, these fancy tools were not available to people back then. I don't know why there's such a focus on them now. I know they're aesthetically pleasing and nice, but it's this cycle of making you want it and making you spend your money when you don't need to do that. Witchcraft does not need to be expensive. I find that I get the job done with the most simple tools, and maybe I'll make a video of my favorite tools someday. But aside from that, there's things that you might have if you're a traditional witch or on a certain path, like altars, wands, anthemes, cauldrons, incense burners, bowls, offering bowls, mortar and pestle. I mean, the list really goes on, and any beginner book will have your decent list of what witchcraft tools are and what they all mean, because they all are correlated with different elements, masculine energy, feminine energy, and so on and so forth. But again, what I want you to take away is just that you are the most important tool. That's my UPG, but I think that that's pretty common in the witchcraft space. If somebody's gonna tell you you're not a witch because you don't possess something, whatever. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this video. What is spell work? And I'm so sorry that I'm talking with my hands. I'm just realizing that in this moment, and there's probably 100 clips of me just like throwing my hands around. So if that bothers you, I'm very sorry, and I will try to avoid that going forward. This is my own personal definition, but spell work to me is a purposeful attempt to harness spiritual power and manipulate it to effect change. There are some witches out there that truly believe spells themselves and witchcraft in general is solely psychological. It's a placebo effect, it's self-hypnosis, right? It's not actually magic. I don't fall into that rhetoric. I don't really believe that. But again, your path is up to you. You form your own beliefs. For me, spell work is something that I think has made me a better person. It's definitely made me happier. It's allowed me to grow as a person, to use my critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, and creativity. And I think it's just something that has really helped me grow. I know that sounds mushy-gushy, but it's the truth, and I wanted to share that with you because I really think it is capable of doing those things. Spells themselves also can be worked in different time frames. So sometimes it's a one and done and it's quick. Sometimes you're working a spell for days, sometimes you're working a spell for months, and sometimes you're working a spell for years. It just depends on the type of spell. We can think of spell work almost like cooking, right? You can cook something plain Jane, no seasoning, and it's probably not going to be very good, but it's there. That's like the bare minimum, your intention when it comes to spell work, right? So in the same way that seasonings can make food better, it makes it taste better, right? Sometimes it even makes it look better, it looks more appetizing. The same thing can be said for correspondences when it comes to witchcraft. Aside from yourself and your power, there's things that you can layer on top of that to make it more powerful. Some general ways that you can make spell work more powerful is by enacting them on a certain day or certain hour, using color symbology, using certain movements, using planets, using elements, moon phases, certain herbs, candles, etc. to make your spell more powerful and give it that little extra oomph. And if you've made it this far in the conversation and you're like, all of that information is great, but I still don't know what a spell is, because there's a lot of terms and a lot of things thrown around in our space. Again, I'm doing the hand thing. I'm so sorry. I'm just learning that I love to talk with my hands. And to give you some examples of actual spells that you might have seen or heard about, again, I can't cover every type of spell in this video because we would be here forever, but some popular examples of spells would be candle spells, poppets, sigils, witches' bottles or jar spells, money bowls, charms or mojo bags. There's also not magic and things like witches' ladders. Usually those types of spells require preparation and a lot of energy and time to make them, but spells can be as simple as putting on a shirt that's the color black because you want to invoke the spirit of protection. Again, this is a you do you type thing. A spell can be as simple as you want or extravagant as you want. All right, let's talk about when spell work goes wrong. Does the world end? Do you conjure a demon and he just stands there in your bedroom? The simple answer is no, and I'm gonna be realistic with you. 90% of the time, what happens when a spell goes wrong is the spell just doesn't work. You don't get the results that you wanted. It's not gonna backfire on you or triple effect amplify the energy and come back on you and ruin your life. There's a lot of fear mongering when it comes to our space and people saying, this is why you shouldn't do baneful magic, because if you're inexperienced, it's going to come back on you, it's going to ruin your life. And most of this rhetoric is pretty harmful, it's a load of crap, and of course there are things to consider, the type of spell that you're doing specifically, on what the possible outcomes could be if the spell fails. But don't get caught up in the fear mongering because it's just unnecessary. I also just want to let you know straight up, every witch has failures and makes mistakes. It's part of being human. It's part of the learning process. It's in fact one of the best ways you can learn is by failure, right? And then planning what you can do again to succeed and grow as a person or as a witch. So if somebody's telling you that they've just never made a mistake and all of their spells have worked perfectly and they've just gotten everything they want, you should probably run for the hills because that person is probably a load of walking crap. Our next topic is magic words, and if the camera is like slightly repositioned to one angle or another, I apologize, but I just kicked my tripod and it readjusted everything. Most of the time, you'll find that spell work requires words of some sort, and I'm an English teacher and a nerd, so I will tell you, of course, that words hold enormous power, but that's just my take. Spell work could involve you writing something down, it could involve you speaking something, even if that's loud like yelling or whispering something. You can also say it in your mind. I know some people struggle to do that, like visualization wise, but that's a popular thing. You can sing, you can chant. Spells can be just regular sentences as well. They don't have to be a certain length and they don't have to rhyme. When you think of witchcraft, you oftentimes think of movies or just media references and secular references in general, which really glamorizes these long spells that are rhyming and just so powerful, and the wind is flowing back your hair, but that's not really the case in real life. Writing a spell that rhymes can be an easy way to chant it or memorize it better, but it's not necessary at the end of the day. My favorite way to invoke the power of words in my spell work is to write a petition of what the spell is doing and what is going to happen and signing my name. Sometimes I activate my petitions by burning them, and sometimes I will just add them into whatever spell work I'm doing in that moment. Music is our next topic, and there's a lot of traditions out there that incorporate music into spell work and witchcraft in general. A lot of that is through singing or chanting or musical instruments. I know witches that like to do their spell work with background music, something that makes them feel powerful. That might be an actual singer, that might be drums, that might be chanting. For me personally, I just like the peace and quiet. Our next topic is all about motion. So a lot of people and a lot of traditions believe that the way you're moving energy into your spell work is very important. And to give you some examples here, clockwise motion is usually associated with invoking, building, and creating energy, and counterclockwise is associated with banishing, releasing, and dispersing energy. Also, when you're anointing something with oil like a candle, or even if you're folding a petition, the direction that you're doing that in matters. So for me, if I'm anointing a candle, if I'm bringing something to me or drawing it in, I'm moving that oil towards me. If I'm sending something away or banishing, I'm moving that energy out, so up and away. I also use this when I create petitions if I'm folding them. So if I'm drawing something in, I fold it towards me, and that might be a set number of times. If I'm putting something out in the universe or I'm banishing, pushing away, I will fold it in the other direction, going outwards. All right, our next topic is a pretty popular one. I am just going to give you the basics on this. There's whole videos on YouTube dedicated to this, but it's moon phases. Moon magic is associated with the patterns that the moon makes. So the moon gets darker, it gets lighter. As a general rule, if it's waxing, meaning it's becoming brighter, it's better for bringing things in such as luck, growth, love, or manifesting other things in general. If it's waning, that's when it's becoming darker. It's good for releasing, banishing, or knocking down obstacles. The full moon and new moon are both very popular for ritual work within the witchcraft space. On a full moon, you'll hear a lot of people saying that they're charging their crystals or moon water, or they're doing spell work for releasing, cleansing, restoration, protection, and manifestation. A new moon, much like it sounds, is a time for new things. So a lot of people do spell work around healing, setting goals for themselves, focusing on new beginnings, and just starting new growth in general. Now we're going to get into seasons and wheel of the year, and seasons and the wheel of the year are very powerful when it comes to spell work. They mimic the natural cycle of nature itself through life and death. In the spring and summer, we usually think about planting seeds, new growth, and rebirth. In the fall and winter, we think of harvest, reflection, and death. The wheel of the year is mostly associated with Wicca, although a lot of pagans and witches celebrate the Sabbats. And what the Sabbats or holidays are, they're just folk festivals that are usually celebrating certain energies that a season is bringing in. For example, Samhain. Each Sabbat carries its own energy, and each Sabbat has different spell work that would be appropriate to go with it. And just like seasons and the wheel of the year, elements have powers that are associated with them, and specifically earth, air, fire, water, and spirit you'll hear talked about a lot in the witchcraft space. I'm gonna throw a chart up on screen so we can discuss each specific element, but earth is about balance, stability, and it's associated with the direction north, the season of fall, and feminine energy. Air is life force, movement, soul. A lot of people don't really connect as much with air because it's invisible, so it's hard to visualize. But if you take a second to breathe in and out, that would be the element of air. It's literally the breath of life. It's associated with the direction of east. It's a masculine energy, and it's associated with spring as well. Fire represents passion, love, creativity, desire. Its direction is south, it's a masculine element, and its season is summer. Water is associated with healing, cleansing, purification, and change. Its direction is west, and it's a feminine element. And spirit refers to the life force. So it's a mix of feminine and masculine energy, and it's basically a bridge between the physical and spiritual. Now, all 5 elements are regularly depicted in a pentacle like the one that I have in my hand, and you've probably seen this many times before. So it's thought that when all 5 elements are in a pentacle like this, it represents protection and it represents balance. And also when you look at a pentacle, spirit is always represented at the top, and then again, each element has its own direction on the pentacle when you're looking at it. And you might have seen a pentagram before, which is just the star without the circle around it. It's a pentacle when it has a circle around it, and pentacles and pentagrams can be facing right side up. They can also be inverted like this. The meaning doesn't change. I know society and media and television has demonized both the pentacle and the pentagram, but they're nothing to be scared of. Again, I just explained here what it is. You'll often find that a lot of witchy tools have a pentacle on them, and again, it just represents balance and protection. Of course, my camera battery died in the middle of me filming, so I'm just gonna go ahead and film the rest of this on my phone. My next talking point are times and specific days of the week, and I'm not actually gonna go over this and explain it because we would be here literally forever because it's a lot to dive into. Every day of the week is associated with a different planet and has different correspondences that could aid in your spell work, and it's a lot to get into. Like I said, the same thing is said about hours. So in terms of times to do spell work, specific times can mean certain things or help with certain things. Almost all beginner books will have a section over this, so that's why I'm not covering it. But if you're interested, definitely research and look into it. Color magic is our next topic, and this one is very popularized in our space. And you can see people utilizing color magic through what they wear, makeup that they put on, jewelry they wear, the candle colors that they pick out. There are so many ways that you can use color magic in your practice. I'm going to throw up a quick card so we can look at it together and get an overview. Red is typically for grounding, strength, passion, courage, lust, charisma, and reversals. Orange is for creativity, success, justice, opportunity, ambition. Yellow is for intelligence, learning, reason, focus, confidence, memory, and joy. Green is for nature, healing, money, love, fertility, growth. Blue is used for communication, traveling, expression, forgiveness, calm. Purple is used for influence, psychic abilities, authority, royalty, wisdom, knowledge. Brown is for home, protection, animals, stability, and family. Black is for banishing negativity. It's for protection, binding, and transmutation. And white represents spirituality, peace, higher self, and purity. It's also worth noting here that white, a lot of times in certain practices, such as candle magic, can be used to substitute for a color that you don't have. Again, almost any beginner book that you're gonna buy is going to have some sort of reference to color. If you have a book on candle magic, it will most definitely have a reference to colors and what they mean, but this was just to give you a quick overview. All right, we have made it to our final topic, which is spell disposal and magical trash. How do you dispose of something once you've done the spell, you've done the thing, and what do you do now? I'm gonna caveat this slide with saying use your common sense and just be accountable for your own actions. You should never be putting something that's toxic or non-biodegradable into the environment because you're messing up the environment, you can mess up the soil, and you can mess up the overall ecosystem. Aside from that, I know it can feel weird to dispose of a spell, especially if you've spent a long time working on it. It can almost feel wrong to dispose of the remnants, but it's perfectly okay to just get rid of them. This is my UPG, but when a spell has worked its course for me, I believe that that energy has gone out and done the things that it needed to do. But I also acknowledge there's times when you want to dispose of an active working, meaning something is meant to be active for as long as that spell, whatever it is intact. Like if you had some sort of jar protection spell and it's meant to be active as long as the jar is intact, I get why you would want to dispose of that. And that's more of a means of storage rather than actually getting rid of the spell. My general thought process on this is that if I feel the spell has done its course, I'll let it go into the trash. If I feel it's a spell that needs to be buried or stored somewhere so the energy can still do what it needs to do, then I think of disposal methods. Fire is a great way to dispose of something. Again, don't ever light something that's not fire safe. I only light paper because I don't want to breathe in harmful things or harm the environment or the people around me. Burial is also something that's quite common. I'm in an apartment right now, and I have previously had houses where I was able to bury things on the property. In an apartment, I can't really do that. I can put things into potted plants, although that's not my preferred method. Please use your common sense here though if you're burying something. I know many spells talk about burying something at a crossroads, and for certain spells, I get why that's important, but I've seen spell books talk about burying spell jars on a person's property where you're doing a baneful working on them, or burying them on some sort of courthouse property or government property in general. And I want you to think about the implications of that. Literally just use your common sense. What would you do if the police got called and you're standing there on somebody's property trying to bury something in their yard? You probably wouldn't know what to say, and you'd probably end up in jail. So although this is going to sound rude, please just don't be stupid. If you're doing that, make sure that you're not harming the local environment and the wildlife. Personally, I would only put something in the water if I knew it was going to disintegrate and not bother the local wildlife or the water system in general. I have also seen some protection and baneful spells that require you to flush things down the toilet. Please think about your own plumbing system and do not mess it up because that's very expensive to fix. Also, that water is recycled, so you don't want things that are not meant to be in a toilet going to a water treatment facility. Throwing something into the trash and it going to the landfill is always an option. And of course, you can break a spell up. So if you have parts of a spell that need to go in the landfill because they're not biodegradable, then you can put it in the trash. And for example, if it was a candle and a piece of paper, put the candle in the trash and then take the piece of paper and burn it or bury it. Splitting it up that way is just fine. And at the end of the day, this is again always up to you. I know witches who can't be bothered to put things in water or bury it, and they just throw everything away when they're done. All right, now that we've made it to the end of the video, if you've stayed this far, I just want to thank you because I know this video was very long and there was a lot of information given, so thank you for your support. In the future, when I edit this video, I am sure there's going to be some things that I wished I would have talked about or said maybe differently or covered more things, but I have talked way too much at this point, so I'm just going to go ahead and end the video here. I hope everybody who took the time to watch this has a great day. If nobody's told you, I love you guys, and I will see you in the next video.